My name is Ahmad Al-Saleh. I am 42 years old and a child of the gentle winds of Dearborn, Michigan, a suburban city where mornings begin with the smell of strong coffee and the sound of children walking to school. I grew up there, surrounded by quiet streets, welcoming mosques, and neighbors who, like my family, had roots planted far away in Palestinian lands. My life may seem simple from the outside, and maybe it is. I work as a truck driver, driving along the endless roads of the American Midwest, delivering loads while listening to sermons or repeating prayers to stay focused. My days are long, the nights even longer, but it is honest work, and it supports what matters most to me, my family. I have been married for 15 years to Mariam, the woman who is my soulmate and my faithmate. We have 3 children who are my reason to keep going. Tariq, my eldest son, who is already 14 and full of questions about the world. Amina, 10, with eyes that see more than they tell. And Omar, our youngest, our 5-year-old ray of sunshine, who still speaks with the purity of angels. My faith has always been my guiding light. As a child, I learned that it wasn't just a practice, it was part of who I am. My parents, immigrants from Palestine, raised me with my feet in the present and my heart focused on Allah. They taught me to pray with intention, to fast with gratitude, to give with joy. And more than that, they taught me that Islam is a path that is walked with humility, day after day. Deep down, I have always carried with me a silent desire, almost like a longing for something I had not yet known. An old dream, the Hajj. Ever since I was a boy, I had heard about the pilgrimage as a rebirth, the chance to walk where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, walked, to be literally in the most sacred places on earth. It was not just a religious goal, it was a yearning of the soul. I wanted to see, feel, and live my faith fully, not just with words or gestures, but with every fiber of my being. And that dream was not forgotten. Years passed, and even with bills, deadlines, and the responsibilities of being a family man, I never stopped saving a little here and a little there. Every dollar I saved was like a silent prayer saying, soon, until finally the day came when I looked at Mariam and said, it's time. She smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. She knew how much this meant to me. We began our preparations with reverence, as if preparing for a reunion with our own hearts. I spoke to my children about the importance of Hajj, asked for their blessings, and promised that I would return a different man, a lighter, more centered person, closer to Allah. But the truth is that no conversation, no book, no story told by someone who has been there can prepare anyone for what it is like to be there. The anxiety grew within me every day. I was no longer just Ahmad the truck driver. I was a servant on a sacred path. When I finally stepped onto Saudi soil and we approached Mecca, it was as if time had folded in on itself. The heat was dry, almost aggressive, and yet I felt as if the air was charged with something sacred. And then it happened. The first sight of the Kaaba, that black, simple, powerful structure at the center of everything. My heart raced, my legs weakened, and for a moment the world fell silent. I felt my tears flow without my calling them. In that moment, I was not Ahmad, the father, the husband, the worker. I was just a soul tiny before the greatness of the Creator. Millions of voices around me from every corner of the world were chanting supplications in the same spiritual language. It was as if all of Islam was there, pulsing, breathing together. And I, standing there in the middle, felt something I had never felt before. I belonged, completely. During the rituals, the prayers, the walks, each step seemed to strip away an old layer of ego, pride, and distraction. It was as if I were being polished from within. I felt the weight of my sins, but also the lightness of forgiveness. I looked inside myself with eyes I had never used before. When I finally completed Hajj, I did not return home the same man. I returned with a clarity I had never had before. I returned not only closer to Allah, but closer to myself, to my essence, to what really matters. And today, every time I drive down highways that stretch into the distance, I carry that memory with me. Not as something from the past, but as something alive inside me. Hajj was not the end of one journey. It was the beginning of a new one. And for that, I will be eternally grateful. But it was during one of the most symbolic and intense moments of the Hajj, the stoning of the pillars, representing the rejection of the devil, that my journey took a completely unexpected turn. To this day, I vividly remember the sweltering desert heat, the sun beating down on my skin, and the crowd in constant motion, like a sea of souls united in purpose. The air was thick, vibrating with the sound of stones being thrown against the concrete pillars. Each crack was more than a physical impact. It was a collective cry against temptation, a gesture of purification and resistance. I had been preparing for this ritual for months. I mentally rehearsed the moment I would cast each stone, carrying within it the weight of my inner struggles, my failures, fears, and temptations. It was as if I were depositing into them parts of myself that I wanted to leave behind. The moment I raised my hand to throw the first stone, something strange happened. The stone slipped awkwardly from my fingers, almost as if it had a will of its own. I watched it fly in an unpredictable arc. There was a split second of silence, and then 5, a dull thud against my own head. A sharp blow. Strong. My body staggered. After that, everything went dark. The sound disappeared. The heat disappeared. I disappeared. I don't know if I fell to the ground or was caught by someone. All I know is that in an instant I stopped being there. Reality as I knew it dissolved, like mist before a rising sun. I was pulled into an absolute void, a place with no time, no ground, no boundaries. Dark, yes, but not a scary dark. It was a dark that embraced, as if to say, rest. For a while I floated, completely disoriented. My thoughts felt heavy, dragging as if through thick water. I didn't feel afraid, but I also didn't feel in control. I just was. Then, without warning, the darkness gave way to a light, a soft golden light, almost like the light of an eternal sunset. It wrapped around me like a warm blanket on a cold night. I was no longer in Mecca. I was no longer anywhere I knew. I was in addition. I can't describe it logically. I can only say that it was real, more real than anything I have ever experienced. And then a presence appeared. It didn't walk toward me. Either was there. Not with any clear form at first, but with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. It was as if the very air vibrated with peace, love, and compassion. I looked around trying to understand, and slowly before me a figure appeared. Tall, serene, simply dressed, radiating an authority that needed no words. And then I knew, not because someone told me, but because my soul recognized it. It was Jesus. Yes, he. The prophet I had always respected as part of my faith, but whose depth I had perhaps never truly understood. His eyes met mine, and it was as if he saw every inch of my being, my doubts, my convictions, my fears, my hopes. He did not speak at once. He simply looked at me with a compassionate sadness, as if he understood more than he could say. Then he spoke. Ahmad. The way he said my name, it was like music. Not an ordinary melody, but something that vibrated inside me, as if it echoed in the forgotten corners of my soul. His voice was soft, but it had a weight that went beyond the sound. You are here because you have been searching, he said. Searching for truth, clarity, meaning. But what you have believed, what you have been taught, is not the whole truth. The words hit me like a wave, and I recoiled inwardly. My heart began to race, not in fear but in disbelief. Before I could respond, he continued, more firmly this time. The Hajj is not what you think it is. It is not the path to salvation as you have been led to believe. The rituals, the sacrifice, the outward acts, they are all shadows. They point to something, but they are not the essence. You must look beyond tradition, beyond custom. You must seek the truth that resides in the heart. Those words echoed inside me like silent thunder. They didn't just enter my ears, they went down. They reached the center of my being, where no human word had ever reached. For a moment, I felt like everything was falling apart inside me. Every pillar of my faith, every certainty I'd built over a lifetime was starting to crack. Not in a destructive way, but as if they were being dismantled to make way for something new, something greater. I had no answers, just questions. But for the first time, I felt like those questions were being heard. Jesus, what do you mean by this? I asked, my voice fragile, shaking as if it had come out of a deep well. I didn't know if I was really speaking or if it was just my spirit crying out in desperation. What should we do then? What is the truth? He looked at me, not just with his eyes, but with something beyond them. Something that cut through every defense I'd built up throughout my life. His eyes held sadness, yes, but also hope. A hope so genuine that it seemed to carry the weight of all humanity. Truth, he said with a sweetness that seemed to cradle every word, is not found in rituals, nor in the stones you throw, nor in the holy places you visit. He took a step closer, and for a moment it seemed as if time stood still as he listened. Truth is found in love, in humility, in complete surrender to God's will. One broken heart is worth more than 1,000 empty gestures. You must return. Seek this truth with all your heart. Don't let external acts blind you to the true message. Before I could respond or even take a deep breath to process, he was simply gone. Didn't walk, didn't turn around, just disappeared into the same serene light that had brought him in. And soon the light too began to dissipate, like mist at dawn. The darkness returned, soft at first, then total. I felt as if I were being sucked back into my body, pulled from eternity into an instant. And then I woke up. I was on the ground in the sweltering heat of Mecca, lying on the rough stones of the stoning area. The muffled sound of voices, hurried footsteps, the murmur of the crowd surrounded me. My head throbbed as if it had been hit with the weight of the world itself. I blinked, trying to find the sky, but it seemed too far away. Someone knelt down beside me. A firm hand touched my shoulder. "Brother, are you okay? You were hit. You fell. You were unconscious for a few minutes." I looked at him, but his voice seemed to come from far away, as if I was trying to tune into two realities at once. I nodded slightly, even though my mind was in complete turmoil. As I tried to sit up, everything seemed out of place. The sun was still shining brightly, but there was no warmth in me. The voices still echoed, but they made no sense. It was as if I had returned from a place where no one really comes back the same. A place where the heart is touched by something the world does not understand. I looked around and saw the pillars, the same pillars that symbolize the rejection of evil, of temptation, of Satan himself. I saw them with different eyes now, as if they were suddenly just structures, stone, cement, tradition. Jesus' words still danced in my mind. Truth lies in love, in humility, in surrender. And with each repetition, they became clearer, more firm, more real. I stood up slowly, my body staggering, but my soul in turmoil. I grabbed the stones that were still in my pocket, preparing to continue the ritual. But something inside me resisted. What I had once seen as the pinnacle of my faith now seemed empty, a mechanical gesture. I asked myself, am I really rejecting evil, or just participating in a theater I've been told is sacred? I tried to keep going. I took slow steps toward the next pillar, but each step was heavier than the last. I held the stone tightly, looking at the crowd, at the screams, at the raised arms, at the flying stones, and everything seemed distant, as if I were watching it all from the outside, as if my spirit was hovering above me, watching sadly. The message I received was too strong to ignore. It burned inside me like a purifying fire. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab someone by the shoulders and ask, "Do you feel it too? Did you notice it too?" But no one stopped. No one looked. Each one fulfilled his role, driven by centuries of tradition, by faith, by expectation. But was it by truth? In the eyes of everyone there, I was just another pilgrim, another man fulfilling his religious duties. But inside, something had already changed forever. I was collapsing inside. A spiritual crisis of such proportions that I never imagined I would experience had completely engulfed me. It was as if everything I had ever known was crumbling before me, stone by stone, without my having any control. And this was the most frightening thing, the loss of control, the loss of certainties, the feeling that the ground of my soul had given way, and now I was floating, lost between what I believed to be true and what Jesus had just shown me. I didn't know what to do. Should I continue? Should I finish the pilgrimage like so many before me, complete the rites and return to my life, my family, my routine? Or should I leave it all behind? Should I abandon what I had been shaped by, what my parents had sacrificed to teach me? The tension inside me was unbearable. I felt torn between two worlds. On one side, my wife Mariam, my children, Tariq, Amina, Omar, and the entire community in Dearborn who knew me as the pious, devout man, the exemplary Muslim. On the other side, this new truth, this quiet, unmistakable touch of eternity that Jesus had placed in my heart. I walked away from the crowd. My feet instinctively led me to a more secluded corner, away from the tumult of the stoning area. It was a quiet corner, as if the desert itself knew my soul needed sanctuary. I sat there, my body exhausted and my spirit at war. My hands were dirty with dust, my lips parched by the sun, but my mind was on fire. Jesus' words kept echoing as if they were a part of me now. Truth is not in stones, nor in places. It is in love, in humility, in surrender to God's will. These words had been planted like seeds inside me, but I wondered, was there enough fertile soil for them to grow? Or was I still dry land, hardened by years of beliefs, traditions, and fears? Everything I had ever believed in, what my parents had taught me, what I had learned in the mosques, what I had repeated in my daily prayers, was now under a new gaze, illuminated by a light I had never seen before. I thought about Mariam. How could I look her in the eye and tell her this? How could I tell her that the culmination of my faith, the Hajj, this journey she had helped me plan, prayed so hard for, had become the moment when everything came crashing down? How could I explain that Jesus, the one we had respected as a prophet, had met me there and spoken to me like a father speaks to a son? How could I explain that maybe, just maybe, the faith I had always held dear was incomplete? And my children, how could I guide them? After this, what path would I have to offer them if I myself no longer knew what mine was? I felt an overwhelming loneliness, the loneliness of someone who sees a truth that no one else seems to see. The desire to share it was intense, but with whom? My traveling companions were immersed in their own experiences, in their own rituals. If I told them what I had seen, they would call me crazy, perhaps a traitor. But deep down I knew what had happened was real as my own existence. I closed my eyes, I took a deep breath, and in a flash of calm, a new thought emerged, not as an answer but as a question whispered within. What if Jesus wasn't rejecting everything? What if he wasn't denying Hajj or mocking the rituals? What if he was simply calling me to go deeper, to not stop at the surface? Perhaps the problem was not the ritual itself, but the fact that my heart was so focused on the outward act that I had forgotten the essential thing, the why. Why do we do what we do? By habit, by tradition, by fear, or by love? Was I doing it for God, or just because I was taught that was how it was done? I didn't have all the answers, far from it, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I couldn't go back to my old life as if nothing had happened. I needed to seek the truth with my whole being. I needed to understand what was essential, what was eternal. The rest of the pilgrimage passed in a blur. I completed the rites. Physically, I was there, in the supplications at Arafat, in the night prayers, in the walks back and forth between the holy sites. But my heart was absent. It was as if I were watching a movie of my own faith, but now with a new perspective. A perspective that could no longer be mistaken. Jesus' words kept haunting me, gentle and powerful. And with each passing day, the disconnect grew. I tried to pray, but I felt distant. My heart no longer found the intimacy with Allah that had once been natural to me. It was as if I was trying to get closer to Him through a path that no longer led anywhere. A beautiful traditional path, but perhaps for me, no longer true. I didn't know yet what I would do, but I knew that this search, this hunger for truth, that was real, and it was just the beginning. I remember it like it was yesterday. The house was silent, except for the ticking of the old kitchen clock and the distant sound of a car passing by on the street. The children were already asleep. Omar cuddled up to the teddy bear he wouldn't let go of. Amina with her storybook spread out on the bed, and Tariq so grown up now but still sleeping with the door ajar as he had done since he was a little boy. Mariam was sitting on the couch, wrapped in the blue blanket my mother had given us years ago. She looked at me with one of those looks that only someone who knows you deeply can give. Calm, but full of silent questions. "You're different, Ahmad," she said bluntly. Her voice was soft but firm, as if she knew something was wrong and was just waiting for me to confirm it. I sat beside her, feeling the weight of everything I carried, the weight of the unspoken words, the weight of transformation. I remained silent for a few seconds, looking at my hands calloused from the steering wheel, the road, life. How could I begin to explain to her what had happened to me in that sacred place? How could I tell her that in the middle of the most important ritual of my faith, I had an encounter with the one who for us has always been just one prophet among many? During Hajj, I began, my voice low. Something happened to me, something I can't quite explain, but it changed everything. She looked at me carefully without interrupting. It was at the stoning of the devil, I continued. I was hit by a stone. I think I passed out, but what I experienced during that time, it was no ordinary dream, Mariam. It was real as this. I had been somewhere else, a place of light, and there, I met Jesus. I saw her eyes widen, but she didn't say anything. She just waited, as if she knew I needed to finish. He spoke to me. He looked inside me like no one else had ever looked, and he told me that the path I believed to be the path to salvation was not the true path. He said that rituals, stones, obligations are not enough, that the truth lies in love, in humility, in surrendering to God with all your heart, not just in appearance. She put a hand to her mouth, silent. The tension in the air was almost palpable. Since then, I continued, my voice cracking, I can't get back to who I was. I try to pray like I used to, but it's not the same. I try to reconnect with the rituals, with the words, but it all sounds empty now. It's like I glimpsed for a moment something much bigger, much truer, and now nothing fits. Mariam lowered her eyes. A thick silence fell between us. I could hear my own breathing, heavy, ragged. My heart was beating fast. I dreaded her answer. She stood there staring at the floor for long minutes, and then slowly she looked back at me. "You have always been a man of faith, Ahmad," she said, her voice soft as the evening wind. "You have always sought truth with sincerity. If Jesus spoke to you, if this was real, then perhaps this is not the end of your faith. Perhaps it is the beginning." Those words took me by surprise. Part of me expected her to doubt, to turn away, to look at me like a stranger. But no, she saw my heart. And even without understanding everything, even without knowing what it all meant, she heard me. And with that, she welcomed me. She took my hand, squeezed it tightly. "I don't understand all this," she said, tears in her eyes, "but you're my husband. And if you're searching for the truth, I want to search for it with you. I don't want you to do it alone." At that moment, I cried, not out of sadness, but out of relief, out of gratitude, out of hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone on this journey. That maybe the faith that was growing in me could also grow alongside her, alongside my family, not as a rupture, but as a transformation. That night we didn't have all the answers, but we had each other, and that was enough to take the first step. Mariam's words hung in the air like a timeless question, not a demand, but a silent cry for guidance, for reassurance. The woman I'd shared 15 years of my life with wasn't confronting me. She was begging me to understand, to not be left behind as something inside me moved into territory even I couldn't map. I swallowed hard, feeling my heart pound in my chest. I don't have all the answers, I replied, my voice heavy with emotion. All I know is that what I experienced was real. I saw Jesus, Mariam, too, spoke with him. He looked at me like no one else had ever looked at me. And his words, they weren't just words. It was as if each one had been written for me before I existed. There was no condemnation, only truth and peace. She looked down. For the first time I saw tears streaming silently down her face, not of anger, not of despair, but of pain. The pain of someone who is watching a part of themselves being torn apart before their eyes and not knowing if they can ever put it back together. I always knew you took your faith very seriously, she said, her voice low, that you always wanted something deeper, something truer. But Jesus, Abdullah, that changes everything. What does that make of us? Our faith? Our children? Their names, just the mention of them made my chest tighten. Tariq, Amina, Omar. They were my life. And now this new path unfolding before me could either take them with me or take me away from them. I still believe in God, he said firmly, trying to calm the storm in his eyes. More than ever. But now I see that perhaps I knew him only from afar. I followed him with discipline, but I had never known him intimately. What Jesus showed me was something alive, something that touches the heart directly, without intermediaries, without mechanical effort. God doesn't just want obedience. He wants surrender. He wants relationship. He wants love. She was silent. Her fingers were still on mine, but not as firmly as before, as if there were a fragile thread there that could snap at any moment. Do you think the way we were taught it is wrong? She asked finally, almost in a whisper. I took a deep breath. I think we have been taught to follow rules, but we have forgotten to seek the essence. And what I have seen, what I have felt, has shown me that the essence is Christ, that He is the way, not as a symbol, but as a living bridge between us and God. I don't understand it all yet, but I know this. I cannot ignore what He has shown me. Mariam brought her hand to her face, wiping away the tears, and looked at me for a few seconds that seemed like hours. I love you, Abdullah. I always have. And I know you're not crazy. I know you would never lie to me about something like this, but I'm scared of what this will cost us, scared of how this will tear us apart from the world we know. I fell silent. There was no promise I could make that would erase this fear. I felt it too every day since I got back. Maybe, I murmured, meaning it, that's the price of truth. Maybe finding it means losing some things, to gain what really matters. She nodded slowly, as if she wasn't ready to move on yet, but didn't want to run away either. Her look said, I still don't understand, but I'm not leaving. And in that moment, I understood that even in the midst of uncertainty, there was something unbreakable between us. The love, the desire to seek, the courage to listen. She didn't have to understand everything right now. She just had to be willing to walk with me. And that for now was all. When I looked into Mariam's eyes that night, something inside me quietly broke. For the first time, I saw not just worry or fear, but the real pain of someone who felt as lost as I did. She had always trusted me. From the beginning of our marriage, she had walked with me with steadfast faith, even through the hard times. She had always seen me as someone who knew where I was going. But now I was adrift with no map to offer. No ready answers, no sure promises, just the raw conviction that something inside me had changed forever. I don't have all the answers, Mariam, I confessed, in a nearly choked whisper. But I know, Ibitat, I need to seek the truth. I need to understand what God is trying to show me, what Jesus has revealed to me. And I have to do this, not just for myself, but for us, for our family. She didn't answer right away. She just nodded slightly, her teary eyes shining in the dim light of the kitchen. There was no fight in her eyes, just a tired sadness, like someone who senses something is changing, even though they don't know how or why. In the days that followed, the tension grew like a silent shadow between us. Short silences became long. Conversations became guarded. I would catch her glances as I sat alone with my head bowed, lost in thought, or as I opened a new book that wasn't the Quran. She tried to understand, tried to reach what I was feeling, but I could see in her eyes that she was losing me a little more each day. And the truth is that I was also losing myself. My prayers no longer came out with the same force. My heart, once so certain, now felt divided, as if it were being pulled by two opposing truths. Jesus' words still echoed within me, alive and flaming. But at the same time, my mind screamed the questions I couldn't silence. Am I betraying my faith? Am I turning my back on everything my parents and grandparents so zealously taught me? Or could it be, Am I just being led to see something deeper? Something that was always there, but that I never saw before? These thoughts haunted me like long shadows at the end of the day. I began to realize that perhaps the true path to God did not lie in repeated rituals, memorized words, or gestures taught from childhood. Perhaps it was something more intimate, more radical, a complete abandonment of everything external to find at last what is eternal within us. Love, humility, total surrender. These were the marks of what I had felt in the presence of Jesus. It was not a religion. It was a living truth, a grace that crossed borders, languages, and traditions. A flame lit in the heart that no ritual could replace. But then the cruelest question of all arose. How can I live this truth here now, in this world where everything is rooted in tradition? How can I return to my community, to my family, and say that the path has changed? How can I face those who know me as a man of faith and say that my faith has been torn apart and rebuilt in silence on another foundation? I didn't have those answers, but I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that I could no longer pretend. I could no longer recite words that didn't come from my heart. I could no longer walk in circles around a God who was now calling me to truly walk with him, even if it meant losing everything, even if it made me a stranger in my own home, even if the price of truth was loneliness. And so began a new journey, not one made of miles or plane tickets, but an internal journey. A lonely, uncertain, sometimes frightening path, but the only one I could follow. And although I didn't know where it would all lead me, there was one thing I knew with absolute clarity. I would never again be the same man who set out for Mecca hoping to find God among rocks and crowds. God had met me in silence, in pain, and in vision, and now he called me to follow him in freedom. The days that followed were a constant storm in my chest. It was as if everything I had known, my routine in Dearborn, my work at the garage, the warmth of my family, and the friendships I had cultivated over the years, had been transformed into an invisible cage, a gilded cage perhaps, but still a prison that was slowly suffocating me. Every memory, every familiar face seemed to remind me of the weight of a life I could no longer fully inhabit. Mariam, with her quiet patience, tried to understand. I could see her struggle, her desire to connect, but the distance between what I was experiencing inside and what she could understand seemed to grow with each passing day. 10 years of marriage, so many shared prayers, fasts together, trips and laughter, and yet at that moment, I was a stranger in my own home. I had crossed a threshold that, no matter how much I wanted, she could not cross with me. Our conversations became fragile, filled with tense silence. When I spoke of my encounter with Jesus, her face would open to listen, but her eyes would betray skepticism. Not because she lacked confidence in me, she had always believed in who I was, but because my words sounded like distant echoes from a world she had never visited. It was almost impossible for her to accept what I was saying. "Abdullah," she said one quiet night, after another heavy silence between us, "I know you're struggling, but I need you to understand. This isn't easy for me. Everything we have, everything we believe in is at stake. How can you say that the Hajj, the pillar of our faith, is a lie? That we've been wrong all these years?" I was silent. What could I say? Jesus' words still danced vividly in my mind, clear as if I had heard them at that moment. The overwhelming love, the burning truth, and the urgent warning he had given me. How could I convey all this to someone who still saw the world through the lens of ancient faith? How could I convey the depth of a divine encounter that felt like a light shining after a long dark sleep? "I don't have all the answers, Mariam," I said, my voice breaking, "but I can't ignore what I've experienced. I can't pretend that everything is okay anymore. Something has changed inside me, something that has changed me, and I can't just go back." On her face, the hardness gave way to a sad softness. I saw the tears threatening to fall, the fear growing there, not only of what I was becoming, but of what this all meant for us. What about us, the children, our community? What will they think? What will they say about you? Her voice was shaking, filled with the anguish of the unknown. I felt that fear too, because deep down I feared the same thing. But I knew one thing. There was no way I could stay in the comfort of a life that the truth had already torn apart. "I don't know what will happen, Mariam," I confessed almost in a broken whisper, "but I need to seek this truth. I need to follow this path, even if it means walking alone." That night, for the first time, I saw my wife as vulnerable, as lost as I was. The sight hurt me deeply. It was like being the author of her own sadness, and yet I could not give up what was calling me. The weeks that followed were confusing, marked by an all-consuming emptiness. My work at the garage, which had once been a refuge and routine, became a constant challenge. Simple tasks slipped my focus. My mind drifted through internal storms. I walked the streets of Dearborn, searching for something I couldn't name, a sign, an answer, a breath of peace. Loneliness gripped my chest like an invisible hand, and the knowledge that my choice had distanced me from the community that had always been my foundation did little to ease the pain. I was no longer the same man who had set out on Hajj with the certainty of a safe path. Now I walked through shadows and new lights, carrying the weight of uncertainty, but also the flame of a truth that could not be ignored. Mariam began to pull away little by little, as if an invisible wall had been built between us brick by brick. I could feel the distance growing thick and silent, like a shadow settling over our home. She still loved me, of that I had no doubt, but the love, no matter how deep it was not enough to fill the void that had opened between our hearts. It seemed as if we had begun to walk on different roads that grew further and further apart until the chasm seemed unbridgeable. It wasn't just Mariam who was pulling away. My friends were also starting to distance themselves. The change within me didn't go unnoticed, and it made them uncomfortable and uneasy. For years I had been that steadfast, dedicated Muslim who followed the precepts, respected the traditions, and took pride in my faith. But now everything seemed different. I was questioning everything: my faith, my beliefs, my reason for being, and this change frightened them. I remember one particular night when I met Imran, a close friend from the mosque and a constant figure in my life. He had always been a man of integrity, solid in his faith, someone I could lean on. Together we shared prayers, discussions, and dreams. But that night, when I saw him standing across the street, a strange uneasiness settled over me. "Abdullah," he called, his voice warm but wary. "How are you, my friend?" I smiled, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. "I'm fine, Imran. What about you?" He hesitated for a moment, and I could see the doubt in his eyes. He had heard about my Hajj experience, and rumors were spreading fast. In the mosque, whispers and glances avoided my presence, whispering that I had gone astray, that I was no longer the man everyone knew. "I heard some things, Abdullah," he said, lowering his voice. "Things about what happened during the Hajj. What's going on? Are you okay?" I looked at him and felt the weight of his words. He sounded genuinely concerned, but there was also a hint of judgment in his tone, a subtle distance beginning to form between us. "I'm fine, Imran," I replied, forcing a smile. "I've just been thinking a lot." "A lot." He nodded, but the doubt in his eyes didn't disappear. "You know, we all go through hard times, it's normal. But you need to be careful. There are rumors going around. They say you've lost your way, that you're rejecting everything we've learned." A sharp pang shot through my chest. This was the reality I now faced. The community that had been my home was turning its back on me. I was no longer one of them. I had become an outcast among those I had once called my brothers. "I'm not rejecting anything, Imran," I replied calmly, almost in a whisper. "I'm just seeking the truth, trying to understand what God really wants from me." For a moment his expression softened, revealing a glimmer of hope. "I do hope you find it, my friend. But remember, there is a path we all follow. Be careful not to stray too far from it." He walked away slowly, leaving me there on the sidewalk, alone with the thoughts that swirled restlessly in my mind. His words hung in the air, heavy and full of meaning, but they had no power to change what had already been engraved deep within my being. The truth I had discovered could no longer be denied or ignored, no matter how much the world around me tried to keep me from it. There I was, at a crossroads that I could not avoid. On one side, the familiar path, the faith that had raised me, the devotion to Islam, the prayers, the rituals, the community that had welcomed me since I was a boy. On the other, a new path, shrouded in mystery, called by a soft but firm voice filled with love, grace, and a truth that seemed to come from a place deeper than anything I had ever known. Choosing this new path meant risking everything: my reputation, my community, my very family. I did not know what lay ahead, nor where this road would take me. All I knew was that once the truth was revealed, there was no turning back. Under the starry sky of that silent night, I felt the weight of this choice. The future was uncertain, and the path ahead was hard and lonely, but it was still the only one I could take. I took the first step, hesitant but determined. The days began to blur together in a blurry whirlwind. With each step, the world I knew seemed to recede, fading like an ancient memory, receding into the distance. I spent long hours alone, reflecting and reliving the Hajj encounter, every detail fresh in my mind. Jesus' words echoed like an inner thunderclap. "The Hajj is not what you think, it is a lie." It was a warning, a profound, unshakable, overwhelming truth that consumed me from within. But how could I fit this new revelation into the life I had built? How could I reconcile this truth with everything I had, with everything I loved? Mariam and I became strangers in the same house. She retreated, trying to understand the turmoil I was experiencing, but unable to bridge the gap that had formed between us. The children felt the heavy silence, the absence of the father who had once smiled, played, and guided them with unwavering faith. Now I was a stranger to them, a man with empty eyes filled with doubt and confusion. I was no longer the man they knew, and I didn't know who I was becoming either. Mariam's distance tore me apart. I had always trusted in her strength, in the love that united us, in the faith that had always been our foundation. Now I felt lost, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. I wanted her to walk with me, to understand this new journey. But deep down I knew I couldn't yet. I had crossed a threshold that seemed impossible for her to follow. So I wandered the streets of Dearborn, searching for something I couldn't even name. I visited the mosque a few times, but each time I felt the doubtful and judgmental stares, the whispers that had already spread like wildfire. They knew I had moved, they knew the rumors, and they didn't know how to deal with me. One afternoon I stood in front of the mosque, gazing at the building that had once been a safe haven. The call to prayer, the adhan, sounded in the distance, and for a moment a sharp longing washed over me. I missed that sense of belonging, the warmth of the gathered community, the feeling of being part of something bigger. But in that moment I knew I could never go back there the same way again. I had changed, and this place, this world could no longer contain me. A voice behind me made my heart race. It was Imran again. The same friend who days before had spoken to me with a mixture of concern and doubt. But this time, there was something different in his gaze, more serious, more charged with tension. "Abdullah," he said in a whisper, his voice almost a thread of caution. "I need to talk to you." I slowly turned to face him, but the words escaped my mouth. How could I explain all of this? How could I translate the storm of emotions and the silent revolution that was happening inside me? I felt a lump in my throat, that familiar weight of not knowing if I would be understood. "What's wrong, Imran?" I tried to sound calm, although inside I felt like a whirlwind was about to explode. He looked around, as if afraid the world might hear our conversation, then lowered his voice. "People are talking, Abdullah," he began, with an almost palpable sadness. "They are saying that you have lost your way, that you have gone astray. I have heard things about your experience during the Hajj. I don't know who to believe anymore." Those words fell on me like a cold, heavy rain. I had known this was coming, the whispers, the judgment, the shunning. But hearing it from Imran, my friend of so many years, was an unexpected and profound pain. "Imran, I'm not lost," I replied, my voice shaking, thick with sincerity. "I'm just trying to find the truth. The truth I found in that moment. A truth I can't ignore, even if I wanted to." He looked at me with a mixture of confusion and concern. "But Abdullah, that is not the way. You know that. What you're saying is not what we were taught. It is not the truth." "I know it's hard to understand, Imran," I whispered, my chest tight. "But I can't deny what I felt. I can't deny what I experienced. Jesus spoke to me. He showed me something I can't explain, but I know it's real." Imran's eyes hardened and he took a step back, as if the words had created an invisible barrier between us. "Jesus, Abdullah, you know we don't believe in that. We don't follow him. We follow the teachings of Prophet Muhammad. That's not our path." I felt as if the familiar walls of my old life, which had once protected me, were now closing in around me, turning into bars that imprisoned me. I was trapped, torn between the faith that had created me and the truth my heart had discovered. The tension that was beginning to corrode my bonds was destroying the foundation of my existence. "I'm sorry, Imran," I said softly, the weight on my chest almost suffocating me. "I wish I could explain everything to you. I wish you could see what I saw, but I can't. I can't pretend anymore." He turned and left without looking back. I stood there, heartbroken, feeling loneliness engulf me. That moment revealed something I had already suspected. My journey was no longer an internal battle. It was a fight for my soul, a path that could cost me everything I loved. The next few weeks were a deep dive into despair and loneliness. I spent hours deep in thought, battling the storm within me. My search for truth took me to unexpected places. I read the Bible. I studied the life of Jesus. I tried to understand the words that had touched my soul. But I continued to pray, not only to Allah, but also to the one God I now recognized, the one who had revealed himself through Jesus. My prayers became more intense, more urgent, almost a silent cry in the dark of night. One of those nights, sitting alone in my room, the weight of my decision seemed overwhelming. Suddenly, I heard a soft knock on the door. My heart raced. Who could it be? I opened the door and found Mariam standing there, her eyes red from crying. She had come. She had come to try to understand, to try to find a bridge between us. "Abdullah," she said, her voice shaking, almost a whisper. "I don't know what's happening, but I can't lose you. I can't lose the man I love." At that moment, a spark of hope shone inside me. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a way back, or at least a space for us to walk together, even if she couldn't yet understand everything. "I love you, Mariam," I said, my chest tight, my voice heavy with feelings that nearly suffocated me. "But I can't just go back. I can't pretend I didn't see what my eyes saw, or ignore what my heart knows to be true." She looked at me, searching for some answer, some safe haven that would calm her doubts and fears. But at that moment, I was lost too. The path I had chosen, so full of uncertainty and ruptures, was not a path she could follow with me. I could see it in her eyes. There was love there, yes, but also a distance that perhaps could never be overcome. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know if I can keep up with you on this road. It was in that moment that I realized that the truth I had found had not only cut me off from the friends, community, and traditions I knew, but had also built an invisible wall between me and the woman I loved. The loneliness that had once seemed distant was now a constant companion. I was truly alone. The days were slipping away, turning into heavy weeks, and I found myself on the edge of an abyss. I stared into the void in front of me, feeling a fear that mixed terror and freedom. Loneliness tightened my chest, but paradoxically, there was a strange peace in that isolation. In the silence that surrounded me, I began to hear something I had not heard for a long time. The whispers of my own heart, muffled by years of traditions, expectations, and obligations. I remember one particularly cold night, sitting in my small, nearly empty apartment, where the only sound that broke the silence was the steady hum of the refrigerator, and every now and then the distant rumble of a car driving down the deserted street. I hadn't heard from Mariam in days, and I knew that the words I had said to her cut far deeper than I could bear at that moment. But even so, the truth I had discovered was firm, too solid to deny. I opened the Bible once more, the pages worn from frequent handling and constant searching. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. Perhaps a sign, a confirmation that this winding road I was traveling had some meaning, that my efforts were not in vain. I had always thought that the answers to life's most difficult questions lay in faith. But now everything seemed different, as if I were seeing the world in a new light. When my eyes fell on Jesus' words, I felt something I had never felt before. A deep peace, unlike any superficial certainty. It was not an easy peace nor a static security, but a peace born of surrender, of the understanding that truth was not something to be held tightly to, but to be embraced, even when it tears us apart inside. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I read these words over and over again, each one pulsing through my chest like a call. How could I have gone so long without seeing the profound meaning of these words? It wasn't just about believing in something, but about building a real living relationship with God. A relationship that transcended barriers, breaking down the boundaries of religion, culture, and even personal identity. But the reality of this new faith was overwhelming. It meant that everything I had built, my entire identity as a Muslim, the security of my community, the beliefs I had carried throughout my life, was no longer enough. I would have to give it all up. Give up the protection and comfort of the familiar and walk alone, with only a new, fragile, uncertain faith in a God who had been revealed to me through Jesus. Yet in that moment of solitude, something inside me told me there was no other way forward. Turning back, that was no longer an option. The truth I had discovered during that sacred pilgrimage was no mere coincidence, nor was it the result of chance. It was, I felt, a divine intervention, an urgent call to something much greater, something that transcended the rituals, repeated prayers, and rigid rules that had previously shaped my life. But the road ahead was far from easy. I had lost Mariam. I had lost the friends who shared my faith and traditions. I had lost the comfort and security of the community that had welcomed me for so long. And perhaps most painfully, I was about to lose my very identity, the man I was, the life I had known. All of it slipping through my fingers like fine sand, impossible to hold on to. I vividly remember one cold night in Dearborn. I was wandering aimlessly through the quiet streets, trying to find some peace amidst the turmoil that was swirling in my mind, when I spotted Abu Bakr, a man from the mosque who was known for his fervent devotion, who often spoke about the importance of following the path of the Prophet Muhammad with unwavering faith. When our eyes met, his face, which had previously been one of recognition, changed to one of deep concern. "Abdullah," he said quietly, almost as if he were afraid of his own words. "I've heard the rumors. People say you've lost your way, that you've strayed from the path. Is it true?" I felt the weight of that gaze on me, the suspicion, the silent judgment. I knew the questions and accusations I would face would be the same as always, but this time I felt no fear. "Yes, it's true," I replied firmly, feeling my heart pounding. "I found something, someone, that changed everything for me. I can't deny it anymore. I can't pretend I didn't see the truth." Abu Bakr's face hardened. "What truth, Abdullah? This is not the way. We follow the Prophet and we have not strayed. You cannot follow Muhammad and Jesus at the same time. They are not the same." His words stung. Each syllable seemed to cut a little deeper, but inside me the fear had disappeared. "I understand what you are saying, Abu Bakr," I said calmly. "But the truth I have found is not about following a man. It is about following God. And God has revealed the way to me through Jesus. I cannot deny that." He shook his head, sadness filling his voice. "You are lost, Abdullah. You are being deceived by false doctrines. You must repent and return to the right path before it is too late." I stood there feeling the crushing weight of his words, but deep in my soul, I knew there was no going back. I could no longer be the man I had been. nor live the life I had known. "I'm sorry, Abu Bakr," I murmured, barely above a whisper, "but I cannot go back to what I once believed. I must follow the truth that has been revealed to me." And with nothing more to say, I turned and walked away, knowing that this decision would change everything: my family, my friends, my community, and the very essence of who I was. I had lost my place in the world I knew, but I had gained something even greater: the truth that led me to God, the truth that promised peace. Even as I walked away, my heart knew the struggle was far from over. There would be new questions, relentless accusations, pain I could not yet imagine. My faith would be tested, and I would have to face the full consequences of this choice, no matter the cost. I knew deep down that this calling had not been by chance. This path, however arduous, had a purpose for me, a greater purpose that I could not ignore. Even if it meant facing the entire world alone, I would follow it no matter what. The truth I had found freed me, but it also isolated me. It was as if, in opening my eyes to this new reality, I had become a stranger to everyone around me. But for the first time in my life, I experienced a peace that did not depend on people's acceptance or approval. It was a peace that came from the assurance of God's approval. This deep peace sustained me on the darkest nights, when loneliness seemed overwhelming. And so I continued on my journey. Alone, yes, but never lost. Faithful, yes, but never blind. I had found the truth, and now walking in it was all that mattered. The days that followed my conversation with Abu Bakr were the darkest, but also the most revealing days I had ever experienced. Many sleepless nights consumed me, mentally replaying everything that had happened in the past few months. Every conversation, every moment, every feeling brought me back to the crossroads where I now stood. My relationship with Mariam, once so strong and full of promise, had crumbled. The distance between us was not just physical, it was a separation of the soul. My connection to the community, to the family and spiritual network that had sustained me, was shattered. I had lost the comfort of knowing who I was, or rather, who I thought I was. Everything was changing around me and within me, but deep down I knew that this change was no accident. It was a divine order, necessary and inevitable. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, I sat by the window of my small apartment. The golden light of the setting sun filtered gently through the curtains, illuminating the worn pages of the Bible as I reread with renewed devotion. Words that had once seemed distant and strange to me now pulsed with living life. Each verse was a heartbeat, each passage a subtle revelation that illuminated my path. But along with this awakening came a flood of guilt and sadness. I could no longer pray in the mosque as before, nor fast during Ramadan with the same faith and joy. My heart was divided between two worlds. One, the one that had shaped my identity throughout my life, full of traditions and certainties. The other, new and strange, that called me to an entirely different path. And the struggle I faced wasn't just within myself, it was also with the world outside. The weight of judgment from those around me became almost unbearable. Friends I'd known since childhood began to look at me with suspicion, their smiles turning into expressions of doubt or disapproval. I could feel their cold stares as I walked past the mosque, hear the whispers echoing off the walls, whispers that carried doubt and condemnation. Still, the more I felt the rejection, the clearer my purpose became. One night, I took refuge in a small coffee shop on the outskirts of Dearborn, trying to sort out the jumbled thoughts swirling around in my head. The world seemed to weigh down on my shoulders like an impossible burden. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Mariam. "Abdullah," she wrote, "I don't understand what's happening to you. You've changed so much. I miss the man I married. Why are you turning away from your faith, from your family?" My chest tightened. Her words, laced with pain and confusion, cut deep. Mariam had always been the rock that held me up, and now she was the one who felt lost, just like me. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight of what was truly at stake. Not just my soul, but the souls of the family I loved. I typed the reply slowly, choosing each word carefully as if it might be the last message between us. "Mariam," I wrote, "I have not changed my opinion of our faith. What I have found is a deeper understanding, something that goes beyond what we have always known. I know it is hard to accept, but the path I am following is the one that leads me to God. I cannot deny the truth that has been revealed to me. Please try to understand me." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the send button. In my head, I could hear his voice begging me to turn back, to give up this lonely road. But I knew there was no turning back. I pressed send, and along with the heavy weight that settled on my chest, I also felt a strange sense of relief, as if an invisible burden had finally been lifted. The next few days were marked by a silence that weighed like a stone. Mariam didn't answer. I met her only once in the hallway of our apartment building. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She said nothing, but the look she gave me said it all. She mourned the man I had been, and in a way so did I. But the man I was becoming, despite the pain, was firmer, more aware, more certain of the truth I had discovered. The weeks passed and loneliness grew around me. I attended church on Sundays, searching for a new place, a new spiritual family, but I still couldn't find a home there. I was too vulnerable to open my heart and tell my story, to explain what had really happened at that moment of Hajj. How could they understand? I had already felt the weight of rejection from those I had known my entire life. What if that rejection came back, only now in this new place? It was a constant fear, but there was one certainty that spoke louder. I had experienced something profound, something true that did not fit into doctrines or traditions. I've been on the brink of death and back. On that threshold between life and death, I met Jesus. I felt his presence, heard his voice, and for the first time I understood the depth of the love he had for me. I saw beyond the veil that covered my soul and returned with a renewed purpose, to share this truth no matter the cost. In the nights that followed, I found solace in prayer, not just for myself but for Mariam, for my old friends, for my family. I asked God to open their hearts, to see beyond their fear and rejection. I didn't know if they would ever understand, but I couldn't stop praying for them. It was there, in total surrender, that I found a peace I had never known. The peace that comes when we let go of trying to control everything and trust that God is guiding us even when the journey is uncertain. As the months passed, the loneliness didn't go away, but it became more bearable. I was no longer alone. I felt God with me, even when it felt like the world had abandoned me. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life. I attended Bible studies, sought out people who could help me grow in my faith. Slowly, a new community began to form, a place where I was accepted not for who I had been, but for who I was becoming. But despite all this new strength, there was a part of me that still missed my old life. The faith I knew, the community that had once been my safe haven. I knew this path would be difficult, that I would still face challenges, doubts, questions. But with each passing day, I felt more grounded, more at peace with who I was becoming. One afternoon, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, looking out over the city of Dearborn, the same city I had always known, but which now seemed different, almost unrecognizable. I myself was different. I had undergone a profound transformation, a change that words could never fully express. I had seen the truth, and it had set me free. I had been broken and rebuilt, and though the scars remained, they no longer defined me. I was no longer Abdullah, the Muslim I once was. I was Abdullah, the son of God, walking in the light of his love and the truth he revealed. And even though I lost so much, I gained something that is priceless. A living relationship with God, a new identity in Christ, and the peace that comes from knowing that no matter where this journey takes me, I will never be alone. With each step I took, the words that had guided me since the beginning of this transformation echoed in my heart. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And so I continued, looking ahead, to a future that was uncertain, yes, but full of hope.